New quarterback, a big comeback win, a bye week, and things are looking a little bit better for Oklahoma than they have in recent weeks. We've got, of course, Red River straight ahead. We got Parker Thune here from OU Insider, KREF Sports, Monday through Friday, noon Central. Parker, what's going on today?
Not a whole lot, Mark. Excited for the week ahead. For OU folks, for Texas folks, it's the best week of the year. And Saturday will be the best day of the year for one fan base. It'll be the worst day of the year for the other. We'll all find out together around 6 p.m.
And one of the great debates in sports is, of course, best rivalry, most heated, most intense, whatever adjectives you want to place to it. But you made a couple comments to me before we started to record about this being unique. So in your eyes, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, I haven't experienced an Iron Bowl. I haven't experienced an Ohio State-Michigan game. I can't just throw a blanket statement out there and say this is the best rivalry in college football. I feel like I'd have to experience all the others before I made that judgment, at least all the best that the sport has to offer. But what is undeniable about this game, Mark, is that there's just nothing like it. Neutral site, virtually equidistant between the two campuses, 100,000 seats in that stadium, all filled. There's not going to be an empty seat in the house when those two teams kick off this Saturday. And of course, the most unique aspect of all of it is that you've got half the stadium covered in burnt orange and half the stadium decked out in crimson. So nothing quite like OU Texas. And of course, we've gotten some very, very memorable games in this series in recent years.
So, Parker, does Red River SEC change this rivalry in any way?
I saw a tweet last night, and it's 100% true. And I know that's going to get a lot of that's going to get a lot of run in the headlines this week. Oh, first Red River rivalry in the SEC. It just means more now. Here we go. But in reality, the tweet I saw last night was this game could be a MAC game, and it would still mean just as much to these two fan bases, and the atmosphere would be just as electric. And that's 100% true. Conference affiliation aside, all that matters is that these two programs and these two fan bases absolutely hate each other. And that's what makes a good rivalry, Mark. Some legit dissension between the programs and between the fan bases.
Parker Thune's here breaking down OU football for us. Of course, you can catch him on KREF Sports Monday through Friday, noon Central, and of course, OU Insider on Rivals as well. So what Oklahoma accomplished on the Plains in the final 5 minutes or so of that game, was that some kind of fluke? Can they bottle that and keep it going? I know I'm asking the impossible question, but
Yeah.
I know it wasn't a fluke from the standpoint of this being a better team than the Auburn football team. But of course, they were in a situation where from the first drive on, the offense had been dead until J.J. Hester showed up out of nowhere. I had to look him up, Parker. I looked him up and saw that he had one catch 2 years ago, and he basically has not contributed to an offense for 3 seasons. But he comes up big with the catch that started the turnaround.
Yeah, that's right. And to be honest, I think the doldrums that Oklahoma experienced down on the Plains were inevitable at a certain point, because when you're changing quarterbacks, when your scheme is evolving in real time, and it is for Oklahoma, they've moved away from the RPO, which was a hallmark of the offense when Jackson Arnold was at the helm, to an offense that better suits what Michael Hawkins does well, and an offense that is more in line with Seth Luttrell's tendencies over time as a guy that was brought up through the coaching ranks in the air raid discipline. And so the scheme's evolving. They had basically 5 days on the practice field leading into that game to figure out something that could get them past Auburn into the bye week and allow them to kind of reset, do a little bit of a deeper install, and prepare accordingly for the challenge that awaits them against the Longhorns. And we knew that this Longhorns team was going to be no worse than number 2 in the nation coming into this game. And then lo and behold, Alabama goes and loses to Vanderbilt over the weekend. And now the Longhorns are the number 1 team in the country. They'll enter this game, this series, as the number 1 team in the nation for the first time in 40 years, Mark. And so there's a lot riding on this game. for both of these teams. Obviously, Texas is seeking a sense of validation. Oklahoma, I mean, I can't remember the last time you had a 14-point favorite in this game, but that's what Texas is coming into this contest. To circle back around, though, I think Oklahoma's ineffectiveness on offense for much of that game against Auburn is just kind of a natural consequence of dealing with injuries, trying to adjust in real time to so much change and so much instability. And I don't expect Oklahoma to come out Saturday and have it all figured out. I don't expect that it's going to be some magical blitzkrieg and all of a sudden the Oklahoma offense explodes for 500 total yards. No, if Oklahoma wins this game, it's going to be on the shoulders of their defense, and it's going to be because the offense does just enough behind true freshman quarterback Michael Hawkins. But I do think that there's going to be substantial improvement offensively for Oklahoma. There needs to be substantial improvement offensively, and there's really no excuse when you've gotten an extra week to prepare for this game.
And just to extend on your point about the point spread in this game that people may not be as aware about is that just think about all those Oklahoma teams that dominated the Big 12 were decidedly the best team in the Big 12 throughout the Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, et cetera days. And even before that, over Texas teams that would eventually win 5, 6, 7 games. And the point spread usually reflected that there was some knowledge in Vegas that even though these teams are on different levels, that it was going to turn out to be almost always a really good game. But yeah, Texas in that 2 touchdown range this time around.
Well, and I'll say it every year till I'm cold in the grave, Mark. It does not matter how both of these teams look on paper coming into this game. It does not matter how they stack up against one another in terms of the conspicuous level of talent or coaching or whatever. You have to throw out everything you know about these two teams when they hit the field at the Cotton Bowl, because as we've seen so many times over the years, there's just something about this game that manages to bring out the best in both of these programs. And if you don't have a very obvious extenuating circumstance like 2022, when Oklahoma was devoid of anyone on the roster that could effectively throw the ball with an injured Dylan Gabriel, outside of that game, Mark, you look at this contest over the last decade, that's the only OU Texas game in 10 years that's been played at the Cotton Bowl that's been decided by more than one possession. These two teams always play each other close. This is always a tight football game. And obviously, history goes back further than a decade, and there have been some blowouts over the years, certainly. But what you've come to expect between these two teams is that it's going to be a slugfest for 60 minutes. There are going to be some massive momentum swings, and ultimately, it's going to come down to who makes the plays in crunch time.
And even though some of these matchups can be thrown out the window according to rivalry lore, we'll still, of course, ask you to match up these two teams. And of course,
Sure.
Oklahoma, despite the struggles, I think people are confused between, and they're not quite getting across the nation that even though that this team did not look good overall against Tennessee, for example, and then almost lost to an average Auburn team, that on defense, wow, they are really good. I don't think there's any question this is a top 10 defense in the nation.
Well, and that would lead you to believe, Mark, that if this offense can kick itself into gear, that you're looking at a top 10 team in the nation. But there's no denying that this defense has been really strong. And it's what has catapulted them to 4-1, when most years in the past, if Oklahoma has this type of offensive performance through 5 games, they're not anywhere close to 4-1. But the defense has really turned a corner, or so it would seem, in year 3 under Brent Venables. This is a huge litmus test for them, though. They did a good job containing Nico Yamaleava and that Tennessee attack. Unfortunately, the offense couldn't do enough to win them that football game. It was a 25-15 final. 25. If your defense holds the opposition to 25 points at the University of Oklahoma, you'd expect that that's enough to win you a football game. But in 2024, with the instability that this offense is dealing with as they kind of continue to seek their identity. They haven't found it yet, but they're seeking an identity. They're seeking solutions. They're seeking continuity. And so until you can establish that offensively, Mark, the recipe is going to be pretty simple. Oklahoma is going to have to win the turnover battle. They're going to have to get off the field on 3rd down. They're going to have to keep opposing offenses, not just Texas, but shoot, for the foreseeable future, until we see Oklahoma do something offensively that leads you to believe, okay, like this is the Oklahoma that we're all familiar with, then this defense is going to have to hold opposing offenses in check at pretty much every turn. You're not going to be able to allow more than 4 or 5 scoring drives a game if you want to expect to emerge victorious. And so the challenge is there for Brent Venables and this unit, and they've risen to the challenge thus far in the 2024 season. A bigger challenge ahead against this Texas team, but they're capable. They've got talent at all 3 levels. They've been opportunistic so far this season when the opponent has given them the chance to generate turnovers. So real interested to see particularly what this defense is able to do in the first 15, 20 minutes of the football game, because I think that's going to set the tone in a big way for the remainder of the contest thereafter.
So, Parker, while this offense searches for an identity, that identity is going to be closely attached to what Michael Hawkins can do. And of course, he can run around and make plays that way. And then I guess you take your shots with him as a thrower, but he's not going to stand back in the pocket and dissect the defense. So, how much different is that than what this team was prepared to do under Jackson Arnold?
Well, you say that, Mark, and I think a lot of people perceive that. Oh, Michael
Okay.
Hawkins isn't necessarily a pocket guy who's just going to sit back there and dice them up. But he's absolutely capable of doing that. Did it at the high school level. And, you see a guy that has that kind of speed and that kind of elusiveness in the open field. And your inclination is to think, okay, he wants to get outside the pocket. He wants to go off script. And that's not necessarily the case. I think what makes Michael Hawkins so well suited for this Oklahoma offense in 2024 is they don't have great offensive line play. They don't. So he's not always going to be able to rely on 4 or 5 seconds of protection. And there are going to be times where he has to bail on the pocket and bail quickly. But if the pocket is there, man, he is very, very adept at going through his progression, finding the open receiver, and just taking what the defense gives him. And that's what Oklahoma has to have, Mark, because with how battered this receiving core is, with how ineffective the run game has been for the Sooners, what you have to do is be content to just move the ball down the field 4 or 5 yards at a time, 7, 8 yards, whatever. Take the short gains, take the stuff in the intermediate. Yeah, Hawkins is going to want to rear back and take a shot every now and then if it's there. And there were 2 opportunities against Auburn. He didn't hit one early in the game to Brennan Thompson. He did hit the more pivotal one late in the game in the 4th quarter to J.J. Hester down the field. But Hawkins is an excellent and very accurate short and intermediate passer. And so I think that's going to be a crucial facet of the game plan. It's just give him as much of a pocket as you can and let him go to work, because for all that he is as a runner, and he is very dangerous as a runner, I think what the rest of the country hasn't yet become acquainted with is his talent as a passer. He's not an athlete that's playing quarterback. He is a quarterback who also happens to have the ability to run faster than just about anybody else on the field.
Parker Thune is breaking down Oklahoma football for us. And of course, it's Red River rivalry week. And that means Oklahoma, Texas getting it together on another Saturday between these 2 old rivals. OU Insiders, the place to be to catch Parker's work, as well as KREF Sports Monday through Friday, noon Central. You talked about the battered receiving core. Is this team finally getting healthy at all?
Well, they're going to get linebacker Desan McCullough back. He is yet to make an appearance in the 2024 season. He underwent, I shouldn't speak out of turn. I can't recall whether he underwent surgery or not, but he was dealing with a foot injury that required some medical attention in fall camp, kept him out for I believe the final 2 or 3 weeks of fall camp, and has prevented him from seeing the field thus far in 2024. But he will return against Texas. Freshman running back Taylor Tatum, who's actually been phenomenal in limited reps, been their most explosive running back by far, and the guy that certainly has the most ability to create when there seems to be nothing there. He's coming back, missed the Auburn game. He was in the concussion protocol. He's coming back for this contest. And so they'll get him back. But beyond that, man, there's no relief at the wide receiver position. They took cornerback Jacoby Johnson, who was a top 100 prospect in the country and had a lot of Power 4 offers and high-end ones to play wide receiver. He's a sophomore. They took him prior to the Auburn game, and they said, hey, you're going to go play offense because they need a guy with a skill set like his. He's about 6'2", 6'3", 200 pounds, very well built, very fluid, very natural athlete who I thought coming out of high school, Mark, I thought he had a brighter future as a receiver than he did a cornerback. So that's a move that the program believes is going to do good things for this passing attack, and they believe he's going to be able to be an immediate contributor beginning with this game. But no Jalil Farouk, no Jaden Gibson, no Nick Anderson, no Andrell Anthony, no Deion Burks. Your top 5 wide receivers, none of them going to be available for this game.
Wow, that's crazy. Now, I don't want to speak out of turn here because sometimes I get a bit confused putting Gavin Sawchuk and Javante Barnes together just because they entered at the same time and they were rated roughly the same. And I know they're very different individuals, but I know that one of them, because I remember from watching the Tennessee game, I watched that almost start to finish, did get a little dull there in the fourth quarter, knowing that Oklahoma had no chance to make a comeback. And then, of course, I caught into the second half of the comeback against Auburn, where one of them, there just seems to be a narrative around that what is wrong with, is it Sawchuk?
I believe you're referring to Barnes, and that was kind of
Yeah.
the lingering question throughout the 2023 campaign was what's wrong, what's missing? And he wasn't 100%. We later found out that had to do with injury, as we kind of all suspected, but it was later confirmed. He was dealing with an injury for much of the 2023 season. And look, neither Sawchuk nor Barnes has really been able to find a groove as a runner. Barnes has logged the most snaps of any back in the Oklahoma backfield to this point in 2024. But nobody in the backfield, save for Taylor Tatum, the true freshman, has been able to establish themselves as a consistent threat on the ground. And to be honest, Mark, that's not really their fault. I mean, there things they could be doing better, certainly, but the offensive line play has not been where it needs to be, specifically in the run game. And things have not been blocked up well. And then when they have been blocked up well for one reason or another, I mean, you go back to that Tennessee game, 5 or 6 of those read options early in the game, the offensive line has it blocked up perfectly if Jackson Arnold hands the ball off and for whatever reason he pulls it. So for one reason or another, this offense has just continually been unable to establish any sort of consistent threat in the ground game. The one guy that has provided some juice is Taylor Tatum because he's just different. I mean, he was the number 1 back in the 2024 recruiting class, the crown jewel of their offensive class last year. And he's already proven his value in a very immediate sense and really emerged, in my mind, I think a lot of people's minds, as the best overall running back in that backfield. But obviously, you want to be able to lean on experience, especially in a game like this, and you want to be able to get either Sawchuk or Barnes going. It just hasn't really happened for Sawchuk at all in 2024. You've seen it in spurts from Barnes, but it's inconsistent, which is obviously frustrating if you're an OU fan watching him pop off for 10 yards on one run and then the next 6 or 7 go for 2 yards apiece. So again, I'm not sure how much of that falls on the shoulders of the running backs because the offensive line play has just not been where it needs to be in the SEC. But getting Taylor Tatum back is going to be huge because that is the one guy that it seems things don't need to be blocked up perfectly in order for him to get his in the run game.
Parker, is this game also a showcase in the recruiting game in regards to visits and also any particular players that are on the fence between these two in particular?
Yeah, I mean, every year there are a lot of very, very significant OU Texas recruiting battles, and that will never change, especially not now that these two teams are in the SEC. A lot of DFW area kids grow up aspiring to play for either OU or Texas, grow up going to this game, grow up watching this game, and so there's a dynamic there, and we've seen this game have an impact in the past. For instance, you go back to that debacle in 2022 for the Sooners. They had a 4-star defensive end commit that was at the Cotton Bowl that day as a guest of the Sooners, who had the ability to host recruits. They were the designated home team. 4-star defensive end commit from Austin by the name of Colton Vosick, and he goes and watches Oklahoma get shellacked by Texas. A month later, he flips to the Longhorns. So this game means something to kids in the recruiting game, and not out of the question at all that if the Sooners are able to win as the designated home team this year with the guys that they'll have the potential and the opportunity to host this weekend on the recruiting scene, if they win the game and win it in climactic or convincing fashion, you could have some guys pull the trigger. That's always a possibility with a game like this.
Parker Thune, KREF Sports. So that's the place to be to catch Parker each Monday through Friday. That's at noon Central. And then OU Insider on Rivals. Anything in particular that you want people to know about this week?
No, nothing in particular, Mark. Enjoy this one, folks. Only comes around once a year. And for those of you that have been lucky enough to watch one of these games in person at the Cotton Bowl, I think there really is nothing like it. And, Mark, I've been covering this game for the last 5 years, but I grew up watching it every single October. Even through your TV screen, you can tell just how incredible of a rivalry and how incredible of a game it is every single year. So enjoy this one.
We enjoyed it, Parker. We appreciate you being here to break things down for us. And yes, enjoy the game.
Of course, Mark. Take it easy. We'll talk soon.